Hello. Just occasionally you hear something that really resonates. Yesterday was one of those days. On listening to Extinction Radio the other day, I encountered Stephen Jacobson for the first time. I'd been thinking about things a lot and was getting ready to prepare something for my blog when I heard the interview. In his interview, Stephen told one anecdote that really resonated with me. He told the story of being rung at home by a nurse who had been involved in palliative care. She told him that she had all the signs of life-threatening illness and was convinced that she was dying of cancer and wanted to walk through the process with Stephen's help. She rang him a few days later, absolutely distraught and sobbing because her test results had come back negative. In the language of the trade, this meant there's nothing wrong with you. The point was that she was at peace. She had great clarity with the idea of dying. When she received the news that nothing is wrong with you, she felt upset and distraught. This is opposite of what we normally expect. I don't know how many times I've been through this, especially with the medical system. I don't think it's because I'm suicidal or have a strong death wish, but that contemplating my own mortality as a result of seriously bad health, I have become more comfortable with the idea of the death of the body. The other thing that Stephen said in his interview was whether you're dealing with serious disease or with deep grief for the death of this planet or something similar. The point is that for me, I'm trying to come to terms with both simultaneously, and although I've reached some degree of comfort, if that's possible, with both, I'm encountering denial not only of the planetary predicament, but with the state of my own health as well. I think every one of us is familiar with the glazing over of eyes and with people changing the subject whenever we mention abrupt climate change, let alone the prospects of near-term human extinction. Even I avoid mentioning the E word in my conversation with most people. I also encounter the same discomfort and avoidance of the subject of my own health. I've become used to hearing, "How are you? I hope you're getting better. You are looking well." And then interest suddenly wanes should I actually start to answer the question honestly. Sometimes I get sincere suggestions that if I just did this or I did that, I would get better, despite the fact that I've been working on my own health pretty much full-time for 20 years, and I've heard about most of the cures that people are suggesting. I dare not so much as suggest that this process has as its conclusion the death of the body. For the life of me, I can't make any distinction between the denial and total unwillingness to speak about what is essentially a logical conclusion of looking at the evidence, the sum of human knowledge about abrupt climate change, and the destruction by this species of smart ape of the ecosystem that sustains us on the one hand, and then on the other with the denial that surrounds the decline of my own physical condition. So, for a little bit of background, I've suffered from a degree of rather less than robust health, at least since my teenage years, when I'm sure that I was exposed to pretty lethal pesticide toxins, in particular paraquat. Depression during my teens, frequent lack of energy or motivation, digestive problems following a 16-month trip through Asia, developing allergies, and finally now an illness that seems to me to be eating away at my body. In my 30s, I developed a yoga practice that kept me healthy for a long time, and I was able to do pretty advanced postures, to sit easily in the lotus posture while meditating. I was also a pretty good teacher of yoga. But I started to notice changes when I experienced cramp when sitting on my heels while teaching classes. And this turned in time to it being painful to do yoga postures at all. The sweet pain of stretching just became simply discomfort. Yoga, which had previously been very pleasant to do, became an unpleasant activity. After 20 years practice, I gradually gave the yoga away and developed a new interest, horse riding. And I'm sure that my horse Biscuit, aka Seemorerocks, as well as myself, have both got huge enjoyment from our time together, although I've never become an adept rider. During an accident while riding in the hills, the cinch or the girth on my old Western saddle snapped and I was catapulted off and I broke my arm. As a result, my health took a major turn for the worse and in the last 5 years has collapsed to the point where sometimes I'm able to get up and have a short ride, but just as often I just have to sit and watch. Negative results. In the language of the trade, that means there's nothing wrong with you. I'd be sent away for blood tests and the doctor would smile beatifically at me and tell me that the results showed that there was nothing untoward, that there was nothing seriously wrong. Wasn't that great? Yeah, that would explain why I feel worse, much worse, month by month. Attempts to explain that my liver was under assault from toxins would elicit blank looks. Attempts to explain that I had been exposed to pesticide toxins would be quickly brushed off. What are toxins? The medicines you want to give me are toxins. We can't have any of that nonsense. Silly me. I'd keep on going back to the quacks and try to explain my symptoms, debilitating nausea, dizziness, exhaustion, and a myriad of other symptoms. But of what importance is nausea when the test results showed that everything is okay? Pain, that's all right, they're good at that. They'll happily give out every type of painkiller available. Pain for them seems to me to be almost a sin, but for me, well, it's simply pain. The problem for me is that there is no pain, no bleeding from the orifices. Nausea and dizziness are, as it turns out, simply vague symptoms. I was told by one doctor that my symptoms were just old age at the age of 58. Vague symptoms like nausea and dizziness, it seemed, were, in the eyes of one import from the British National Health System, indicative of depressive illness. Going to this doctor, which I went to twice, I spent some time explaining to this individual my objections to modern medicine coming up with a special category for those with symptoms they can't explain. They call it all somatization symptom disorder. Translated into English, this means that anyone with symptoms that can't be explained or when the tests come back normal is mentally ill. After explaining all of this, the doctor asked, was I interested in what she thought? Well, yeah, of course. So she went on with such a lovely smile to ask, had I considered the mental and emotional aspects of this? In other words, translated into English again, I was depressed. Evidently, I didn't suffer from the other possibility, anxiety syndrome. And looking all of this up, I was ever so relieved to learn that I'm not a malingerer, that I don't deliberately produce, feign or exaggerate symptoms. I'm innocent of all of that. I'm just simply mentally ill, apparently in the view of a system that sees itself as perfect. After any of these exposures to the system, I would, like the lady in the story above, become distraught and above all, very, very angry when I was told that there was nothing wrong with me. After having been told by this incompetent that I was depressed, I vowed never to return to conventional medicine, at least to the previous doctor. However, I was summoned back to the medical practice that I go to discuss some blood tests from a visit to the hospital a couple of months before. I thought, well, maybe the results this time might reflect something that was that I knew to be happening within my own body. But no, I found that I'd been assigned a new doctor and a new strategy. At the very least, this doctor was honest and straightforward, and I told him as much. I said that was all that I could hope for. After examining me, he told me that I was obese, and if I went on that way, I would become unwell. He suggested a diet that eliminated carbohydrates and sugar, as well as have my gum disease looked at. He also promised that if I did these things, I would feel at least 50% better. These were, on the face of it, quite reasonable suggestions, apart from putting the cart before the horse. More hope dangled in front of me. I took on the diet and quickly lost 4 kg and had my gums looked at and had one tooth removed because of a gum abscess. So I had some expectations of feeling just a little bit better, but hope turned out to be hopium. I now have to recognize that far from feeling better, I'm more disabled than ever. Holistic practitioners who treat people with cancer are accused of giving people false hope. Was this not false hope? Or should I just conclude that I'm mentally ill? Well, I've long since recognized that none of us come out of this alive, and rather than looking for the next cure or insisting on yet another doctor when the current one is about as good as they get, as was helpfully suggested by one friend of mine who always insists on hope against hopeless odds, I think it is better to see things as they are. All of this has resonance with my other great realization that on the level of our species there is nothing to be hoped for. We don't come out of this alive, neither individually nor as a species. Death comes to us all. No civilization and no species abides forever. As the Buddha says, whatever is the nature to be born is of the nature to die. This is not an easy lesson for ordinary mortals to learn, especially when it challenges the easy and privileged lifestyle we've all become accustomed to. So, coming back to myself, that's always my favourite subject, as it is for most of us. Coming to terms with what we as a species are doing to this living planet, dealing with the immeasurable grief that this gives rise to, and nobody, or almost nobody, wants to share with me, I find myself having to come to terms with a body that is clearly falling apart. I have to deal with the denial, other people's denial for sure, not mine, that surrounds this. Most people, except for the psychopaths and sociopaths that rule us, are full of sympathy. I've had to come to the conclusion that empathy is a very rare commodity. In being sympathetic, what people are doing is trying to get rid of their own discomfort and suffering without trying to step into the shoes of another, even for a single minute. I find people need to hold on to their own hope. Hope is more important, it seems, than truth. But hope is wishful thinking. Optimism is the absence of realism. When I'm dragged away from simply being into the realm of thought, I often crave for the end of the physical body. I don't think, despite contemplating it, that I would take peremptory action to end this life. This would cause immeasurable suffering to at least one other significant other. But I have little fear of death. But saying this, I remember Woody Allen's words It's not death I'm afraid of, but dying. I don't have a religious faith as such, but I do have a deep faith that life does not end with the death of the body. There is life after life, something that remains, something that abides, something that we can call consciousness, or the deathless, or God. Even atheistic Buddhism talks about the deathless. Personally, I rebel against the materialistic notion that our consciousness is nothing more than the sum of electrical and chemical processes in the brain. For me, it just doesn't compute. So I'll continue, at least for now, to stay, or to try and stay with the what is, and bear witness to whatever I or we are served up with in this physical realm, and wait. Thank you.